There's a quiet revolution happening in the way that we live, work, and create. You can see it in movements like slow living, slow growth, slow fashion, and slow travel. Each of these movements is a reaction to the burnout pace of modern life. But what would it mean to apply this philosophy to cinema? What might slow filmmaking look like? Usually, filmmaking is carried out at breakneck speed to save time, to save money, and to get the idea out into the world pronto. But this method does create problems with mental health and sustainability. But also, you don't want your project to stagnate and get into production hell. Today, I'm exploring how we can take filmmaking at a slower pace, but a healthy one. And I have a project of my own that I have been taking slowly, and hopefully that will inspire you with your own projects. In an era of infinite content and shrinking attention spans, filmmakers are pressured to create more and faster. Some filmmakers are churning out films like social media posts, and I'm looking at you, Yorgos Lanthimos. People are worried that Emma Stone hasn't been home in years. And at the other end of the spectrum, studios are chasing quantity over quality in order to boost their figures and sustain their models of everybody being subscribed to everything all the time. The result is a cinematic landscape that feels frantic, not because the stories demand urgency, but because the industry does. Every step from pre-production to post gets shrinked for efficiency. And it means that projects are rushed, schedules feel hectic, and creativity becomes a bit of a luxury. Speed has a cost. It burns through ideas before they have a chance to breathe. But filmmaking wasn't born in a hurry, and early cinema was a slow form of art. Stories emerged through experimentation, patience, and craft. Directors like Tarkovsky, Ozu, and Kiarostami made slowness itself a language, inviting us to sit inside time rather than race through it. And if you're watching this video, you're probably not a studio exec or a filmmaker wrapped up in a 100 million budget with a big deadline looming over your head. You're probably an indie filmmaker who works with soft funding and makes magic happen on a tiny budget. It can be tempting to squeeze your film into a tiny time frame and race through it as fast as you can, so that you can put your art out into the world and so that you can move on to the next idea you have as well. I did this with The Boulder. We shot 14 different setups in 2 days, and my pre-production time was something like a month. But what would it benefit us to go at a different pace? Slow filmmaking is not necessarily about long run times or long shots, although it can incorporate those. It's more about process over product. It asks questions like, what if our creative timelines followed the natural rhythms of discovery, not deadlines? What if we measured success by depth of connection rather than quantity? What if rest and reflection were considered part of the work, not obstacles to it? A slow filmmaker might decide over a location for months, visiting it again and again before deciding to shoot there. They might let their script evolve through lived experience. They might use analog tools or natural light, not just for an aesthetic, but because this creates more presence. Slowness can be a form of resistance, a refusal to let external pressures dictate internal rhythm. I'm making a documentary right now called Thrawn, and it started out 4 years ago as conversations. There was no intent to make a film. I did make a couple of YouTube videos on my old channel, just talking in general about Scottishness, the Scottish accent, anything that I kind of wanted to get off my chest, I did over in that space. And that was really the only place that I was making anything around this idea. With time, I began to speak to people about the Scots duality, this presence in our life of both pride and shame around our culture and identity. And it was just conversations. Lots of people would go, God, yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. I have these thoughts myself. And at no point then did I think that it was going to become a film. It wasn't until I realised that through these conversations, it was hard to articulate. It required the nuance of a full conversation. It couldn't really be summed up. For a while, I explored the term Caledonian antisyzygy, which is something that's been coined to tackle this feeling, but it means nothing in the real world, and lots of people couldn't connect with that as a title. And that's when I realised that actually this could be a film, because if you can't articulate what it is that you feel, maybe you can show how you feel. And from there, the visual imagery came flooding into my head, and I realised how I could make this into an experimental documentary. Now, I like to keep my train of thought, whether that is in some notes in my phone or whether it's the journal that I carry with me. Whenever I have some thoughts or feelings around something that I think might become a film or some other creative project, I'll jot it down. I think it's really important to keep a record of how this is unfolded so that you can always go back to it and draw inspiration out of the roots of the idea. But it's not easy to share those with other people, especially if you've written it down in a physical notebook. So I use the Filmmakers Gameplan to plan all of my films. Every whimsical thought, things that inspire me, links that I've found, images that I've collected, script drafts, can all live in the game plan. And when I'm ready to share it with my team or anybody interested in the project, I can create a link. Then when it's time for production to start, I can manage the crew, the cast, the equipment. I can generate call sheets and risk assessments, and the whole production process becomes much easier because everything all along the way is in one place. And if you're going to be slow filmmaking and you're going to take a few years to get your film made, then it is a good idea to keep everything all in one place. So if you want to check out the Filmmakers Gameplan, I'll put a link in the description. Filmmakers have been utilising slow filmmaking for as long as film has been around. Tarkovsky is often called the father of cinematic slowness. His films move like dreams. Long takes, spiritual silence, and images that ask for patience. He himself has described filmmaking as sculpting in time, and he even wrote a book about his process, which he called Sculpting in Time. For Tarkovsky, slowness was a moral act, a way to give viewers time to feel rather than just to watch. And you can feel it in his films like Stalker and Nostalgia. Not confident that I said that right. Richard Linklater famously spent 12 years crafting his film Boyhood. This follows a character from the age of 6 through to the age of 18, and he filmed it in real time. So he started when the main actor was 6 years old, and every summer they would film a little bit more, and they did this for 12 years. It's a huge commitment. Apparently Ethan Hawke didn't get paid for taking part in it. That was just a labour of love, and he would just come along when he had free time to take part. Patricia Arquette talks about the process and how different that was to every other film she'd ever made, and it ended up winning her an Oscar. The film itself was nominated for an Oscar in 2015, and although it didn't win, it was one of the most talked about movies that year because of the process of slow filmmaking, because it had taken 12 years. And this was so unconventional and so unheard of, but people were fascinated to see the product. And in an era, 2015, where Marvel movies were dominant and cinema was this huge CGI landscape, a film that patiently took 12 years to document a life and doesn't really have a plot, it just follows a character as they grow up. That's pretty huge. In my research for this video, I found that there are movements and cultures all over the world where this practice is quite prominent and people do make films in a slow way. And I found that quite inspirational. As you may be able to tell, I'm here in Japan at the moment, and I can say that partially the reason that I wanted to make a video on this topic is from being inspired by other walks of life where people take time and there are rituals and there is a slowness and a presence to doing everything in your life. To embrace slow filmmaking is to also embrace that your growth may be non-linear. You may make fewer projects, but each one is going to carry more of you. You might spend longer on projects, but they should resonate longer with others too. In a world that is obsessed with output and speed and asking what's coming next, Slowness is an act of rebellion and I guess a subversion of expectation, which is what artists should really strive for. You're saying, I am going to take my time, I am going to let this breathe. After a good year or so of talking to people about my idea as a documentary, so after many conversations and thoughts over years, I finally started to say to people, I'm thinking about making a documentary. It ended up springing into production, although not quite how I'd hoped. I'll admit that I wasn't yet ready to start making it, and the way that production started really wasn't a fit for me. It was that classic cutthroat, speedy, let's do this really quickly and fast kind of production, and that just wasn't what I had in mind. I also wasn't there with the fully formed idea, and I didn't have the clarity of what I wanted from it. The initial production stages, whilst I'm very grateful for them and I will be able to utilise the footage I've captured, were just not on the wavelength that I wanted to be on. There was a bit of chaos, there were mistakes, and I thought, there's absolutely no way that I'm going to keep going this way. I don't want to pick up another shoot in a few weeks' time or a couple of months from now that's going to continue in the same way that this is. I'd actually rather let the project sit for a moment, have a bit more time to ruminate and figure things out, and then I'll know clearly what I'm going to go and do. In doing so, I feel that I have so much more clarity on the project now, and I'm more connected with what I wanted this film to be. It's not a product, it's a presence. It's about emotion and feeling and identity, and those things can't just be slapped together quickly and parceled out to the world. Something I learned when I made The Boulder was that whilst pre-production and production were really fast, I was willing to take my time in the post-production process. And maybe that's because that's my background, that's where I'm comfortable. I've spent a lot of time on projects and thought, this needs time in the edit, this needs to cook. We need to slowly build out what this is and then make decisions. I was happy to let that happen, and I've realised that perhaps that's because of the time I've spent in that space. Maybe the more time I spend in pre-production and production, I'll learn that too. Slow filmmaking begins with waiting. It's all about patience. You should sit with your film before jumping in and understand that time is not the enemy, it's the material. Maybe that's the real craft of a filmmaker. Not to chase time, but to notice it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that it has given you some inspiration with your own projects to take your time, slow down, and really think about how you want to craft what you're crafting without feeling like you have to do this. People want to see what you're doing next. Go, go, go. I am in the process of making Thrawn, and if you'd like to follow along with our progress, you can sign up for our newsletter. We're also running a crowdfunding campaign at the moment, and if you'd like to donate, then you can do so at a link in our description below. But thanks for watching, and good luck with your slow films.